So there is a reason why our channel is called Perpetual Projects. It's him, he's the reason. What'd you buy?
Parts.
It's a whole lot of parts.
It is. It's all the parts except for catalytic converters.
This might be one of the most shiny ones you've brought back. But wait, there's more.
Today on Perpetual Projects, we are working on not the Jeep. What we have here is a flip. And so we're gonna do a little short series on kind of how we're flipping this car and try to give you some pointers along the way if you wanted to flip a car. This is not gonna be an in-depth how-to. This is gonna be this is how we ended up with this car, and this is why we decided to flip it, and this is what you should look for if you want to flip a car. So that being said, the story behind this one. I found this on Facebook for really cheap, and if you look at it, you can see why it was really cheap.
It looks good on the camera.
It was about, I guess, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from my house. And the whole reason I bought it is this car has everything I need to rear-wheel drive swap my Magnum, because I don't want the all-wheel drive system. We don't ever get snow down here. It's really not good for a performance application anyway, and I'd rather just have it rear-wheel drive. So my thought was, I'll go buy this, and for less than $500, I have everything I need to rear-wheel drive swap my Magnum. And then, because Facebook is really good at this, then about 2 days later, I found another 300 about 30 minutes from my house. It was more expensive, but it ran and had a Hemi as well. So I called the guy and I went over there and I looked at it, and it's in some ways as rough, in some ways a lot rougher than this car. So then I thought, well, I have one. If I buy another one, I have two of everything. This one has a bad motor. That one has a bad transmission. I can put one together, sell it, give somebody a good deal on it, and I end up with nothing in all the parts for my Magnum. So that's why we are flipping this car, and kind of the story of how we found it. And what, in my opinion, what you want to look for in a car that you're going to flip is something that doesn't need a lot of work. Like if you don't have an engine sitting here, it's probably not the greatest idea to buy a car that needs an engine if you're going to try to flip it, because you get into a situation where you feel like you have to cut corners and then get top dollar for it to sell it. And then, you know, maybe you make a little money. Maybe the people get a car that is in good enough shape that it lasts a while. But you also run the risk of doing that and selling somebody something that is going to give them nothing but problems. And while you made a little bit of money, you ruined their week or their month or their year. I don't want to do that with this. I am not going to try to get top dollar for this when I sell it. I'm just going to try to make my money back and get a little bit for my time. All right, so the story on this car is the guy I bought it from another guy, and that guy told the guy I bought it from that it had a bad starter, and the guy I bought it from said that they put a battery on it and it clicked but didn't do anything, and so he just assumed, well, maybe it's got a bad starter. He bought it cheap enough, he cut the cats off of it and sold them and made his money back, and then I got a really good deal on it too. Well, this is a pre-Eagle 5.7 Hemi, and they are known for dropping valve seats. I have a feeling that this one's got a drop valve seat, and the motor's probably, if it's not totally junk, it's hurt. But we're gonna go off of the theory that the guy that he bought it from parked it, and then it wouldn't start, and he assumed it was a bad starter. And we're gonna hope that if that's the way it all happened, it's probably not a bad starter, but we'll try it. We'll bar it over and see if it turns over. If it does turn over, I'm not just gonna stick a starter on it and try to fire it up, because there's still a chance that it did drop a valve seat. If it's got pressure on a valve seat and it's holding the engine from turning over, and I bar it backwards and then get it freed up, and then it starts and that valve seat's bouncing around in there, it's gonna junk everything, and I don't wanna do that. So if it turns over, I'm gonna pull all the plugs out, and I'm gonna look in every cylinder, and make sure that I don't see anything not okay in there, not kosher, before I try to start it, because I don't want to cause more problems before we decide what we're doing with this. If the motor is bad, then we're going to go ahead and pull it out, tear it down, and we'll look at it and see what we got. I'm really not sure what's going on here, but the fans are hanging down below the car. So I think we're going to try to figure out a way to tie these up. I don't know. No, I can get to the bolt. We're going to turn it over, see what happens. All right, let's see if it turns over. Not the starter. Man, I never get lucky. Let's see if it turns over the other way. Oh, it's stuck. All right, I'm gonna go under there on a creeper and see if I can see any parts hanging out of the bottom of the block. I think I checked the oil and it had oil. I don't remember, it's been so long now. It's been 3 months since I bought this thing. Guess what? Definitely not the starter.
But you knew that when you bought it, or
I
assumed
did.
that.
I'm not hurt. I bought that. No, I bought that assuming that was the problem. Now we just got to see if maybe we get a good Hemi block that we can build. Since we know this, we're not even going to mess with this engine because there's no point. I have an engine out there that runs. Whatever is got this motor stuck is going to be deeper than what I want to do in the car anyway. So, I mean, you could pull the heads off of it and see what's wrong with it. But I have a feeling I already know. It's got a drop valve and it's probably got a piston turned sideways in the bore like the Magnum had. And the motor's going to have to come out either way. And rather than take it all apart and lose all the parts, I'm just going to leave it all put together and we'll put it on the engine stand. So now we got to decide what we're going to do. And so we're going to just kind of take a look through both of the cars and show you guys my line of thinking of why we're going to do this the way we're going to do it. So you've kind of seen the outside of this car, and it's rough, but it's not. It's decent. It's all here. The paint's not terrible. We'll give it a good bath and clean it up a little bit. You know, do the whole spit shine thing. But the interior in this car, unfortunately, the windows don't roll down because there's no battery in it. But the back seat is really nice. The carpet is black and it's kind of dirty, but it's not that bad. It'll clean up. The worst part of the interior on this car, which I'll open the door and have Amber swing in here, is the front seats. And they've got the speed tape repair, but that's okay because this is not going to be an expensive car. This is going to be a cheap driver for somebody that just needs a car to get back and forth to work. So we'll clean it up, make it look as presentable as we can, but we're not going to try to hide anything by doing that. It's got this, and we might try to pop that out just so it looks a little nicer. We're not going to fix the paint or any of that. But overall, this car is in pretty decent shape. What would be ideal is if that car had this car's problems, because all that's wrong with this one is it's got a bad transmission. That's way easier to change than the motor. But when we get out here, we'll look at this one. As you're about to see, this car is pretty rough. It's missing the rocker panel on this side. It's got dents in every door and every fender. It's got a halfway decent set of tires on it, so we'll use these tires on that car because the ones on that car, it's got mismatched wheels and mismatched tires. And this has mismatched tires, but it's got a pair in the front and a pair in the rear, and I'm okay with that. The front bumper is broken on this car, but this one actually, I heard it run, but it wouldn't drive on the trailer because, well, the transmission's out of it. So it has the parts that we're missing. I don't know if you noticed, we're missing some of the parts on the back there, but this car has those, so we can just transfer those. Because this car is just going to get basically taken down to a bare chassis and probably go to the scrapyard. It's just not worth messing with. Rocker panel's missing on this side. This door is dented. We'll have to swap this mirror over because the mirror on the other car's messed up. But here's the bad part about this car. The interior of this car is destroyed. The carpet is nasty. Every door panel is covered. Like the person who had this, I mean, I don't know what
they're a mechanic.
Yeah, and never cleaned their hands. I mean, look at the carpet next to the gas pedal there. It's just black. So
it's got this dual open feature.
Well, but it doesn't open but this way. The back seat isn't nice in this car. The carpet is destroyed. It's just not. I guess the majority of my decision is based on how much exterior parts this is missing and the fact that the interior is destroyed on this car. If this car was in as good a shape as that car, we'd just swap the transmission, call it a day, and send it down the road. But that's not the case. Neither one of I can't open the trunk because there's no place to put a key in the trunk lid, but the trunk's messed up. The rear bumper is messed up on this one. Not quite as bad as it is in the other one, but that's okay. We don't care about that. So we'll figure out, there's probably a valve stem leaking or maybe a wheel leaking. We'll figure that out. Make sure
this handle's messed up too.
Yeah, this one doesn't open.
Oh.
I don't think it opens from the, I'm pretty sure they told me it didn't open from the inside either, but I mean, the interior on this side is just as nasty as the other side. So that's why we're not going to fix this car. There's just too much wrong with it. And although like we're not fixing everything to make the other one perfect, it just looks a lot better than this one does to start with. So I feel like fixing the other car with parts off of this one, I'll have a more valuable car at the end and can get a little more for my time. And again, like I said, I'm not trying to sell it for a premium price. We're going to try to sell it and give somebody a good deal on it.
Plus, things that look prettier tend to sell faster.
So we're going to go inside, and I think we're going to go ahead and start pulling the motor out of that and see if we can maybe get a look and see a little bit more of what's wrong with it. Well, so if you see all this coolant staining everywhere, that's a good indication that this engine was overheated, like it blew a hose or something. And when I took this upper radiator hose off, there was no clamp on it. There's no coolant in it, obviously. To me, that says that this overheated, and when they get hot, that's one of the best ways to get them to drop a valve seat. So I'm just gonna look down in all the holes and see if I see anything. If I do, I'll try to get you guys in there so you can take a look at it.
We also found a thermostat.
Thermostat in the trunk, yeah. So this one is full of some kind of jelly, it looks like.
Grape jelly?
No, it looks more like apple butter.
Okay, now I want some. Not out of there though.
There's a lot of water in this motor.
But it wasn't sealed, was it? Because those three screws weren't in. Well, it had a hood on.
Yeah, but those wouldn't allow water to get in there. So what we also found was 3 of the intake bolts were broken. It looks like a short bolt that was in there. They were. I don't know what
full bolts.
Somebody was trying to fool somebody. I don't know, but all 3 of these are broke. They're broke off in the head. And that's not that big of a deal to fix, but I don't see any evidence of a dropped intake seat, which is, from what I understand, if I'm remembering this right, that's what the majority. That's what these like to drop, is the intake seat. So now, I guess the next step is just to go ahead and finish pulling it out. I just figured we had the intake off of it. We'd take a look at it and see if we found anything and show you guys if we found anything interesting. Did you get a look in there at the jelly in that number 4 cylinder?
1, 2, 3,
4, right there. I don't know.
really see it. You talking about the white stuff?
No, down in the bottom, there's like some...
Oh, there you go. That's gross.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. That's when you buy a marketplace car, this is what you can end up with. So this was advertised as having a bad starter. So just remember that if you're looking at something on marketplace, 99% of the time, the person who's selling it knows a lot more about it than they let on. Wow, this thing was scary. So I didn't count exactly, but I think there's 6 or 8 bolts on the bottom of the transmission and then 4 across the top. It had 1 on the top and 3 on the bottom. Half the bolts in it were loose, like not even, like the alternator was just kind of hanging there.
The fenders were half zip tied on.
Yeah, half the stuff was, but that's pretty normal for the inner fender wells. They get sucked in because the plastic clips break, and then you can't get the clips back in it, so they get wood screws and all kinds of other assortment of stuff. But the radiator was holding with 2 of the bolts. Neither one of them were the same, so I don't think either of them were original, and a zip tie. There's still a ground sandwiched between the bell housing and the back of the engine on the transmission. That's where they hooked the ground up. They didn't have a bolt, I guess. It's got an eye on the end of it. So it's like, not like it didn't have an eye and they didn't have anywhere. They just, well, we'll just shove it in here and tighten transmission up and it'll be good. It was just everything. One of the MDS solenoids is broke, but that's not that big a deal. So here's where I'm at with this. I think based on some writing on the engine here and the fact that nothing is put back together completely, somebody was swapping this engine in here. I don't know why it doesn't turn over. That's kind of making me hopeful that maybe it's just got like a bad ring ridge or like a rust in the cylinder, and that's what's making it not want to turn over, because at that point we have a good block. We'll have to bore it, but that's okay, because if we're going to build a Hemi for something, we're going to want to bore it anyway and put new pistons in it. I'm speculating. I have no idea at this point, but I just want to show you kind of the last thing that we found before we're gonna pull this engine out. I don't know if you can see that, but this is supposed to be tight right there, and that bolt is supposed to be holding that together. And also behind it, where that open space is, there's supposed to be another bolt that's not installed. And I don't even think that's the right bolt, because the one on this side is also holding this bracket and it's loose. At least it's sandwiched together and both bolts are there, but the only one that looks like it's the correct bolt, these 2 bolts, actually this is probably tight, it's just this nut that's loose. This is a bracket for the alternator, but those are both bigger bolts than the one that's over there. So that one's probably not tight because it probably wasn't the right bolt and it didn't actually thread in, it's just kind of setting in there. So I'm really glad that this didn't almost run or didn't run, like we couldn't make it run, because the rest of this car is just scary. Unfortunately, I'm gonna probably have to go junkyard shopping to rear wheel drive swap my Magnum, because now that you can see it, look right down there at this front cross member on the K-frame.
It's a little crunched.
Well, that's what happens when you hit a parking block at 60 miles an hour, I would say. Or I don't know what they hit. The damage is isolated to that. I don't see any other damage in any of the frame rails or anything, so that's okay. Which would just make it more work, because the other car, we could put all this in the other car. But instead, I'm going to take the whole K-frame out of that car, or the engine cradle out of that car, and put it in this car. Which means I don't have one for my Magnum, because this is different than the rear wheel drive. The rear wheel drive and the all wheel drive are a different cradle. That's okay. I don't mind looking for one for the Magnum. And it's a month or 2 months or 5 months, I don't know, down the road. It's down the road at some point. So we're just gonna take the other cradle, and I'll check it, but I was told that that one had all new ball joints. And the guy who sold me that seemed like he was a pretty stand-up guy. When I was talking to him, just the stuff that he told me all the history of the car, told me exactly what it was doing, and it did exactly what he said it was doing. It started up and ran. It doesn't anymore because we can't seem to find the keys, but
that's a problem for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a problem for a different day. It doesn't matter because it doesn't drive because the transmission's out of it. So we're still gonna have to push it in here. I don't need the keys to pull the engine out, and I'm not gonna use any of that wiring or anything. I'm gonna have to fix the wiring in this. Speaking of wiring, I don't think that that's coolant residue back there. I'm starting to think that's a fire extinguisher residue. You can see kind of there on that wiring harness where it looks a little charred. Well, let's come over here and look at the one that I pulled off the engine. This is from the back of the engine on that side right back there, and it's just melted. So we're gonna have to pull all this off. We'll unsleeve it, untape it, make sure all the wires are good, make sure nothing got hurt. And if it did, we'll just take the wiring harness off the other car. I'd like to keep the wiring harness, and I could keep this one, because if I ever want to Hemi swap something, I want to have that full harness to be able to do it with. But this one, I think, is okay. It doesn't look like it got to any of the wires. It doesn't look like it was a bad fire. I'm guessing from other parts that I found, it's nice when somebody leaves all their extra parts under the hood. So I found this injector, but there's 8 of them in the car, so I'm really not sure where this one came from. And then I also found this. This is the fuel crossover line that goes across the top of the intake. And as you can see, it's been blowed out. And then this side's been cut. I'm guessing they blew a fuel line at some point, maybe when they were putting it back together, and caught the car on fire, and then put it out with the fire extinguisher, and then threw their hands up and sold the car. I don't know. I don't know why. And now the motor's set up. I don't know I don't know what the answer is to any of this. I'm just speculating based on what I found, but we're ready to take the motor mount bolts out, put the cherry picker on it, and get it pulled out of there. But it's getting pretty late, and we're about to get some massive thunderstorms. So I think we're gonna go in the house, sit on the couch, watch the Weather Channel, and we're gonna pick this up in the morning. We'll check in with you then. Now for this week's subscriber showcase, submitted to us by Gavin on our Facebook group. He says his newest project is a 1962 Ford T-Bird. So far, he's got it running and put mag wheels on it. Still has a long way to go. You can check out the pictures Amber's putting on the screen. That's cool looking. That would make a really cool power tour car. I want to thank him for submitting his car. Let him know what you think about it in the comments below. And if you'd like to submit your vehicle and see it in one of our Sunday premieres, send us an email. You can find our email address in our YouTube About section, or hit us up on our Facebook group and hashtag showcase, and you could see your vehicle in next Sunday's video. Make sure to include some pictures and the story behind it. Now back to the video. Ooh. Hey everyone, I just wanted to give you a little update, and actually it's a bit of information. You'll notice that we pulled the whole front wrap, including the radiator support, out of this car. And while that's not required to pull the engine, I got to thinking, I can't turn the motor over, so I can't get the torque converter bolts out. I'm assuming they're there, but they may not be. Either way, I if I have to pull the torque converter out of the transmission, I'm gonna need this extra space to be able to get that engine forward far enough and then pull it out. I thought about dropping the transmission separately, but that's just a lot more work that I don't think I need to do. I may regret this decision, but for now, that's what I'm doing. Anyway, I'm gonna set the time lapse back up and work on getting the motor the rest of the way out. Okay, so as you can see, there was no torque converter bolts in this thing. That feels pretty good. We're gonna have to figure out why there's so much mud. We may end up pulling the transmission out of this and dropping the pan off of it and just looking through it to make sure everything looks okay. Again, this is we're planning on flipping this car, and I don't want to give somebody a piece of junk that's going to break down the first day. Even if I end up not making anything on it, that's not my gig. So I can still get my money back even if I break even on the deal. I'd rather give somebody a car that's going to be somewhat reliable. But now that the engine's out and we can kind of get a good look at the outside of it, I don't see anything on the outside that tells me what's wrong with this. Like the oil, we pulled the filter, or pulled the dipstick, I'm sorry, and it looked good. There's no rebuilder plugs that I can see anywhere on this. Like the little ones they put on the front of the head to make sure, on the freeze plugs to make sure it doesn't overheat. I don't see any holes in the block anywhere. Get down here. But I do see a problem. And so if you notice, it's missing main bolts. That's a problem. That's not promising. I think that this may be a situation of somebody scabbed a motor back together to try to sell this car, and so this motor is probably absolutely no good. We're gonna go ahead and pull the heads off of it and see what the top end looks like, and then if we don't find anything on the top end, we'll have to find an engine stand and we'll flip it over and see what we find on the bottom end. Okay, well, we've got more junkyard markings on this engine. Both manifolds are marked, which is kind of a weird place to mark it because all the stuff that looks like it's marked could technically be unhooked. But I'm gonna go ahead and drain the coolant out of the block itself. And if you're ever working on an engine on a stand, and even in the car, if you can get to it, there's these drain plugs here, and they'll drain the coolant out of the water jackets. Just makes it a lot easier to work on this. You don't spill as much. You're still gonna spill some. You don't spill as much coolant. So I'm gonna get that done, and then I'll set the camera up when I drain the oil so we can see what comes out of there. I don't expect to find anything coming out of the block on the antifreeze side. There, I think you guys can see the drain plug pretty well. Let's go ahead and pull this out and see what drains out of this thing. Hopefully it's gonna hit my drain pan. I don't think it's going to. We'll go this route. Let's hold it up here, just in case. Probably gonna get all over the camera. That's not good. So that's water and oil. Quite a bit of coolant in the bottom there. So, that stinks. Nothing else interesting gonna come out of there. No metal, so I don't know. Oil looks like they just changed it. I'm gonna go ahead and set you up somewhere and we'll start pulling the heads off of this thing while this drains. I'm really not sure at this point what's going on with this thing. It has many problems. So if we look right back here, this will be the number 8 cylinder. It obviously is missing the valve seat, which is not, the number 8 cylinder is obviously missing the valve seat. I'm really not surprised about that, and there's pieces of it all through it, but if we look over here at the piston, I mean, there's pieces of valve seat here, but I don't, there's some pieces jammed in there. Maybe that's what's causing it not to want to turn over. But it really didn't, I mean, it was nowhere near as bad as the one in the Magnum. And then this cylinder is full of whatever this gunk is. And then this cylinder, it's like, I don't know, it's like it was leaking or something, but all the head bolts felt tight on this side. The head gasket looks to be intact and it's installed properly, which, check this out over here. We look right here, we can see that this head gasket is not for this side of the engine, or it's actually just on upside down, because that should say top, and that should say L, and it's all that's backwards. So this head gasket has been put on. If it was run this way, which I almost guarantee it wasn't, that's not what the problem was. Then it's also got a broken piston up here, number 1, but it looks like the block is probably savable. I still don't understand why it won't turn over. I'm gonna put the camera back up there where I had it for the time lapse and leave it in this mode, and I'm gonna try to turn it over again, see what happens. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Like I said, I'm still not completely sure what the story here is. That piston doesn't look like it's bad enough to make it so it wouldn't turn over. I mean, anything's possible, I guess. So let's see what happens if we try to go this way. Oh, there it goes. That's what it was. It was just stuck on that top cylinder up there. It's pretty hard to turn over, but that's not surprising. That piston is dragging pretty bad. I think well, I'll bet you actually I know what it is. Let me get the camera and I'll show you. So I think all that water was actually coming in through the valves. So if we look, you can see, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but I can tell you, if you look right here, that piston is dragging hard right there on that side, and it's dragging hard right here where that the edge of that piston has gotten crushed, and it's pushed that piston out tight against the cylinder wall. So this motor, as long as the bottom end is good, is definitely going to be rebuildable. I'm still dumbfounded as to what the story with this thing is. I mean, it's got this head, the passenger side head has obviously been off. Oh no, that'd be the driver's side head has obviously been off. The passenger side head looks like it hasn't been off, but if you were troubleshooting this, I guess, so maybe when they were troubleshooting it, they pulled the driver's side head off and found that broken ringland on this side and assumed that was the problem and just gave up. I really have no idea how this thing became such a mess. It doesn't really matter, not planning on using any of those parts anyway, but comment below, what do you think could possibly have caused all this damage? And why is it in the condition that we found it in, where the motor was like half pulled out and then it's like they quit? Maybe, I really don't understand. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed. I think the next video in this series is gonna be pulling the black one apart. I don't know what we're gonna do, but we're gonna put this back together. We'll show you guys what we do to get it running. Until then, we'll see you soon. Oh, wait. I almost forgot. Our merch store is now open at perpetualprojects.shop, but it's way easier to find than that. All you have to do is look right below this video, the merch shelf. You can check out the links there. We have some really cool stuff. We have Thrasher shirts, don't have hoodies yet, guys. But if you're interested, send us the email through our Shopify account. And if we get enough interest, we'll order hoodies and we can make any of the stuff. We're making it all ourselves, so we can make anything you want. We can do some colors. We don't have a lot of ink and stuff yet, but if you let us know, if we get a lot of requests for a certain color, we can order the ink and we can make it in whatever color you want. We can get whatever color shirts you want. So hit us up, let us know what you think. See you soon. Now for this week's I can't talk. Hold on. Now for this week's
We should start over.
Yeah. Now for this week's Now for this week's
Wait a minute.
Wait.
That's just scary. We're not trying to give people a heart attack.
Wait. I almost forgot. Our Perpetual Projects shop, perpetualprojects.shop, merch store.
Damn it.